Bienvenidos a Get Boring
Get ready for some
Chisme.
chisme.
All right.
Right. Welcome to another episode. This one's gonna be fun, Bendy.
I know.
I'm excited about this
I
one.
was so excited to talk about this
I know it's gonna be good.
stuff.
Yes. So, well, before we start, welcome to another episode of
Get pinches boring.
Okay, we'll go with that.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Okay, so our topic for today is going to be people pleasing.
People pleasing.
We pinches love it.
That's a heavy one. It's a good one. It's deep. It's something. It happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Like seriously, everybody.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Why do we do it? Why do we people please? I love that question. Like, why do we do it? But for real, why?
Well, let me ask you first. How would you define people pleasing?
Pleasing other people just to get like validation, acceptance.
You can please yourself too, but usually the context we're saying this is on the negative side, right? Because people pleasing positively could be a good thing, but you have to be aware of that to make it positive.
True.
Usually we enter into this toxic, draining aspect of people pleasing.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah, it's I guess the extreme is where we please others on top of our needs, right?
Yeah, self-abandon.
Self-abandonment, or sacrificing ourselves in the sense of energy, time, money, sometimes, experiences. So you ask why we do it. So I cannot think of other reason, but maybe it can come from a trauma. It can come from our education when we're kids, how our family raised us.
Yes.
It can be even cultural, but I think the reason we do it is to belong, is to be accepted, is to be approved, validated. And I think these traits of that aspect is what drive us to do things, actions. Everything transforms into action.
Yeah.
Right? And is where we have to be careful.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is acceptance. Being able to feel accepted is huge. Right. It's like,
what about instead of acceptance, because it sounds positive, maybe it's the fear of rejection.
Oh.
Right? Instead of talking about I want to belong, because that's something everybody tries to do. We try to belong. That could be something good, but maybe behind that people pleasing is the fear of rejection, the fear of being abandoned.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I feel like all those three are connected, actually.
Yeah, part of the same thing.
Yeah. Too bad we don't have 2 hours to talk about it. Because that could be a really good deep topic, because, everything is kind of connected. And it's not just about people pleasing, because people pleasing, like you said, comes from childhood, how you were raised, the traumas you have. And then it connects, like, I people please to not be abandoned, but I got abandoned because, whatever.
And it becomes a pinches cagadero when we combine it with other traumas or toxic patterns.
Yes.
Like, when we grow up older, it's like all these things are being combined, and it gets really difficult to see.
Yeah, because honestly, I don't think that anybody is aware of it until we're aware of it. Yeah. Right? Until you do the self-work, and then you're like, okay, wow, I didn't know. Because, like, for me, I didn't know I was a people pleaser. I thought I was just so nice.
So nice.
I'm such a nice person. I was like, I'm the nicest person ever, right? I would even joke about, like, oh, I'm the nicest person you'll ever meet. But I would say that with subconsciously not even knowing that it's like you're already seeking that approval before someone even gets to know you by you saying that.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So
Pendy, what traumas do you think are linked to people pleasing?
The traumas can very much vary throughout. You know what I mean? Because to be honest, I think for me personally, I think it comes from childhood. Okay, it's either from, well, I think it's, you learn it from your parents, on the way
Right.
that your parents love you, don't love you,
Right.
attention, whatever. So then that's how you as a little kid start molding into, oh, I have to be this way to get this. I have to be that way to get that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I
So
think
yeah, I
it
think
just
it's difficult.
depends.
We're not experts in that field, but
Yeah.
maybe the parents' approval, everything begins there, right?
Yes.
And you know what? I was watching a video. There was this guy explaining how different it can be, how we as parents. I'm not a father, but as parents, the simple fact of expressing or making the kids think is how they're gonna perceive their own value. And the experiment, it was, suppose that there's this kid drawing, and then they show the drawing to the father or the mother, right? And then everybody does like, oh, congratulations, blah blah blah. But that already sets like, oh, they're congratulating me for something I just did, so I'm gonna keep doing it because that isn't like they're happy, right? And there is the validation thing. Oh, I'm being approved.
Yes.
You know? But if the parents would tell the kid, oh, that's I like this, but how do you feel about the drawing?
Exactly.
Right? There's the start to think about inwards.
Yes.
Inward, like, oh, and maybe they can create these constructive critiques.
Yeah.
For themselves.
That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. I think I saw something similar like that. Like, what do you actually think about it?
Right.
Because like, even when we grow up and somebody says, well, how do you feel? You're like, what? I don't understand
what
that
do you
question.
mean?
Yeah. Like, what do you mean?
You're too deep.
Yeah. You're way too deep. This got too deep too quick. I gotta go.
I gotta go drink with my friend.
Yeah. Forget about this question you just asked me. But yeah, that's so true. So that it all plays into this thing, right? So it almost tells us never to ask ourselves, what do we actually think about what we've created here?
Yeah.
Right? Are we proud of ourselves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people pleasing is probably the most evident aspect to become self-aware. At least for me. Like, I start getting aware of myself, and I think people pleasing taught me that. Like, it is the most evident thing to be aware of. Like, to see yourself doing something that maybe you don't want to do.
Okay. So when do you feel that while you were doing all your work, like, when do you feel that it was that point of like, you realized you had people pleasing tendencies and you were doing it?
Yeah.
Then you go out into the world again, and then you're like, oh,
yeah.
When was that moment where you caught yourself like, I am a people pleaser?
Right. So I think your body tells you all the time information. And even when you're a kid, you feel things. Your body feels things. It feels fear. It feels unsafety. A lot of things, right? But maybe you're not aware until some point. And I think for me, I can tell it was in the middle school, high school. I remember this group of guys that they were the cool guys. I wanted to belong, right? So I forced myself to enter into that group. And I remember myself laughing, when maybe somebody made a joke. But I didn't find the joke funny.
Or sometimes you don't get it at all, and you're like,
yeah. And probably happened to me too, but I saw this treatment with many other guys, probably people pleasing as well, that some guys bullying these other guys, and they never did anything about it. And bullying is kind of also affecting people pleasing.
So you notice people, like, you're people pleasing when you were younger. like in high school?
I mean, I can now in retrospective, I can think I felt it, but I wasn't completely aware what really this is.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Until really, really older.
Yeah, and then when you were older, and then you saw yourself people pleasing for the first time, actually being aware of it. Do you remember that moment on how you felt and you were just kind of like outside of yourself? Like, what? Oh my God, how did I just realize this?
Well,
right?
I don't think I found it just by myself because, I mean, we're kind of old school. We're millennials, right? So there was no terminology in those times. There was no like.
You say those times like we're like we're ancient.
I mean, yeah, it was like other experiences, and I don't think we had that. You know, I didn't know what people pleasing was.
Yeah.
I didn't know love languages or any other stuff until you kind of start. Something is annoying you, then I start digging into, okay, what is it? And also my friends, like, I invite you to take therapy. Then in that moment of self-reflection is when I start doing my research and kind of exploring aspects that I thought I had symptoms from traumas. One of them was people pleasing. Then I started being aware of that. And when I knew about it is where I got to see it in myself.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably around my 30s. Yeah. But then I remember all the times in retrospective that I was people pleasing, and I was, fuck, I'm super people pleaser.
Yeah. Oh my God. Isn't that the craziest thing when you could become aware of it and you're like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. So I learned pretty late, at least to identify that.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, for me, it was probably like a couple years ago, probably like 3, maybe 4 years ago, where I was like,
late too.
Yeah, late, of course. Yeah, because then that's when I started doing the personal self-work. And I remember the therapist I was working with at the time, she was like, oh yeah, you have a lot of like codependency. And I was like, no, me? No, that's not me. And then I worked with another therapist and she was like, oh yeah, that sounds like codependency. And I was like, okay, that's 2 times I've heard it. Let me go see what happened. So I started reading into codependency, and with codependency, there's a lot of people pleasing in that. It's like one of the major things.
Yeah. Who were you codependent to?
To everybody. Just anybody, because codependency, you just.
I mean, it can be general, like towards family, friendships, and significant others.
The biggest codependency, I would say, is my older sister. My older sister.
Oh, okay.
That was the biggest one that I had. But also, when I would get into relationship, I would be very codependent on them.
Oh, okay. So do you think, maybe in abstract, there's this figure that when you find somebody as a relationship romantic, then that figure changes?
No.
Or
it can be. It was like, oh, when I'm at home with you, I'm codependent and people pleasing you.
Okay.
And then when I'm with my sister, I'm doing it here. And then when we're both together, I'm trying to manage it together. To please both of you.
Okay.
So it's kind of pinche cagadero, right? So that's where so then I started reading that codependency book. And then that's when I noticed the people pleasing. And then when I realized that people pleasing, like when it came, I was like, oh my God, when I saw it, I was like, I am such a people pleaser. And I'm so afraid of saying no, or I don't want to, because I'm afraid of losing this connection. Even though I not hated the connection, but the connection was not serving.
Right.
At all. It was just like, why are we here? Right. But it's like you abandon yourself to feel that connection. So, and then you also feel like, if I lose this connection, then I'm going to be alone and lonely and nobody likes me. And then you go into this whole thing. Right. Yeah. So it's like,
which is maybe for another podcast, but
yeah, for sure.
It's a reality that you cannot fulfill everybody's needs. Uh, I would say it's just very few people that you can really connect with.
Yes, when you start doing this work and you're more self-aware yourself, you start realizing there's a lot of people that aren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you try to have these kind of just serious conversations, it's kind of like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Can we just like go get a drink?
I mean, yeah, but
right kind of things.
So, how do you think, or what social factors, for example, what social factors and cultural factors affect people pleasing?
I think it's more like that thing of, like you said, high school, right? Like if you're laughing, then you're gives you this sense of you're belonging, you're cool, you get it, you're in the in crowd,
Yeah,
and nobody wants to feel like the
the
outsider, right?
outsiders.
So
Yeah.
society gives you that
So it's
pressure.
kind of like the society has eyes, and you want to be seen in a good way.
Right. Even though like society is this,
Right.
right? Somehow we gave it eyes and feelings and
Right.
all that,
Right.
even though it doesn't exist. But we say, oh, society expects this from us. And it's like, but who is society? Right? Well, I mean, us people, but it's like, but who said this is right or wrong or
Yeah.
whatever? Or you'll fit in because you're saying yes to everything that I need you to say yes
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I guess culture is similar, right?
Yeah.
Because at this point, I can think of society or culture as a corporation.
Hmm.
So it's not a singular individual.
Yeah, right.
It's a collection of mindsets,
Mhm.
right? But they all want you to be, or the rule is just one,
Yes.
right? Or just a few rules.
Right.
You have to be successful, for example.
Yeah.
Be a good person, blah blah, right? And
Right.
then we rule out ourselves
Yeah.
based on those conditions.
Yeah. But it's like who puts that pressure? Society.
Society.
It's one thing, society that we made up. So yeah, it is kind of crazy that happens, but
So how can you recognize, for example, when you can't say no?
when deep down inside, well, for me personally, that's how we're saying,
When you can't say no and you want to say no. Yes, like what happens to you?
Mhm.
You know, because it becomes a pattern.
Yes.
Yeah, what happens?
Like, so I think it's really hard to going from the not aware that you're a people pleaser to the aware of people pleasing, and in that going from this to here and in that space, it's one of the hardest things
Yeah.
because you're so aware of it. So when you're doing it, you feel inside, oh, here I am doing it and again, and I don't want to be a people pleaser. But then you're so comfortable being a people pleaser that you're like, oh, but it feels good. But so you're battling with your own
Right.
self
Yeah.
now. And that's when I think it becomes like, oh, there's a change.
Right.
There's something different in there. And that's where I think it's like, but I think once you get over the first initial, you get more comfortable being like, no, I'm not going to be a people pleaser and I don't care, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like you're going to lose a lot of connections because of that.
Yeah. It's a big filter.
Yeah. And like for me, I did lose a lot of connections and I felt so lonely. But in that, when you're in that moment, you think, oh, why didn't I just keep people pleasing? Then I would have all these amazing connections. But then you're like, would I? So then you get used to all of those changes. And then when you start being your authentic self, then people are like, oh, yeah, you're actually pretty cool, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Being not a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, what?
Yeah.
You're okay with that?
Yeah. Because you know what? I think the counterpart of that is what they feel
Mm-hmm.
when you when you don't people please them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be like a two-side rejection, different rejection.
Yes.
But this is the source and this is the
Receiving.
Mm-hmm. Right? And probably there's a judgment there too, like, oh, he's not doing what I told him to do anymore. So, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
they can react in a way.
And we're also afraid of that judgment.
We are afraid of that. But at the same time, as you are saying, that makes you more genuine, authentic, and also reliable. Because you start becoming more, okay, I want to say no when it is a no for me. And I'm going to say yes when it becomes a yes. So you are a more reliable person because you are more connected to your truths.
Yes.
And people eventually are going to say, or are going to think, this person is going to say yes when it is a true yes.
Yes.
And it is like an absolute reliable thing.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, you're right. Because, I mean, now that I've, like, noticed that I always say I'm a recovering codependent. Okay, and I'm a recovering...
In progress.
I'm a recovering...
Working in progress.
People pleaser. And when I hear some of the acquaintances or friends that I have now, as my self-aware, tell me, oh no, you're very clear on your boundaries. And it's either yes or no. And you're very clear with it. And there's no confusion. To me, I'm like, really? Like, I'm shook.
They know?
Yeah, I'm shook because I've never heard that before from anybody. It was always like, oh, whatever. But then for me to stand up in my own boundaries and say, no, I'm no longer going to people please, and here it is. And if I lose your friendship over it, great. If I don't, great. At least you know where I stand.
Yeah.
And people accept you and they're like, yeah, I really like her. Like, wow, okay. It's really nice.
Have you experienced people who look at you seeing those boundaries as she's a mean person just because she has strong boundaries?
And no. Well, maybe not like, oh, she's a mean person, but I think that they probably say, oh,
like,
she stands on fucking business. That's where I think people, and I think that's very different for me because before it was like so wishy-washy. I could feel it in myself. And I think like now I'm so okay with being, I don't care. Right. And instead of feeling like, oh, I'm such a mean person, this and that, it reflects difference.
Exactly. Because you worry about, I'm this horrible person and I'm making them feel this way.
Exactly. But at
I give a fuck.
But at the same time, Bendy, here's the thing. You people please and you stress out because you want to make this person whatever happy, and then you're stressing out on everything. You're doing things you don't want to do. And you come home, you're upset, and you're like, why did I do that? I wasted my time. I could have been doing this, and that. All because you wanted somebody to think of you a certain way.
Right.
Instead of being like, no, I don't. I really don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think all that inner discussion after people pleasing experience is not good.
It's not. And it's so, honestly, at first, like realizing that you're a people pleaser and then seeing like outside of yourself, seeing yourself people please. And then you realize how drained you are, how stressed you are, how much weight it carries.
Yeah.
I feel like when you stop people pleasing, then it's like, oh.
You feel lighter.
So light, and you feel so comfortable to be like, no, I really don't want to do that. I promise you that I don't. And it's like, people are like, yeah, that's who she is. You either love her or you hate her.
Yeah.
And that's it. But then it's like your people will always gravitate to you.
Yeah.
So like people who can handle my personality, because I know I have a strong one. And they also get the strong personality in me, but they also get like the greatness.
Authentic part.
Yeah, the authentic and the greatness that comes with it as well.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And that kind of. I'm trying to think deeply right now, but when you get to that point, you also understand kind of who you are more, and you even recognize, you know what? I'm not that nice person, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm even tough and I'm very strict, or
Yes.
and some things about our personality that society can classify them as mean or rude, you know?
Yes.
But you tell yourself that story about your true identity and you're okay with that.
Yeah.
And it's just a personality. I'm
Yeah.
just one more. That's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
That's
And
it.
it's like when you accept that you're a direct person or that you're this or that, it's like, yeah, okay. So when somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, you're like really direct," and it's kind of like you're like, "Okay. Yeah, I know. You're not saying anything that I don't know. Thank you."
I'm gonna tell you directly, yes.
Yes. Exactly. How's this for direct?
Okay, Pendy.
Hmm.
So it causes a lot of symptoms,
Yeah.
not pleasing symptoms. People pleasing is not so pleasing
Yeah.
at the end.
Actually, no. Actually, no, it's not.
How do you think we can overcome people pleasing?
Honestly, I think with a lot of therapy, learning about yourself, reading books, self growth books, um, just a lot of therapy. I honestly do
Self
self
work.
work for self growth, because the more you know yourself, the more you'll be like, I can't, I the more you know yourself, the more you'll be like, I need to stop doing these patterns. And you just are not interested anymore in wasting your energy on people pleasing.
Yeah,
You're just not. And I think that comes with a lot of work. I mean, you could only know this if you do the inside work and know yourself
yeah,
better.
yeah,
Yeah. So I think that's how you can overcome it. And just like the more you discover about yourself is the more that you'll discover about everything else that you do and don't like authentically.
right.
Because sometimes I feel we like things just because we were taught to like that, not because we truly like it,
Yeah,
you know? So,
yeah,
what do you think?
yeah. I think. I mean, it's kind of mixed together our need as humans to be
Mm-hmm.
part of something,
Mm-hmm.
because there are good things about being part of a group, which is you become you can get bigger things. You
Yeah,
become something bigger and stronger when you collaborate. You know,
true.
that's great.
Yeah.
I love that. But as far as your personality, I think you can make a better impact if you're more genuine,
Mm-hmm.
and bring something.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it requires a lot of self work. For my personal experience, I know that I'm still people pleasing in some times,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but it's in a very fine line where sometimes it gets difficult to see that difference. But,
Yeah.
like the big part of smiling all the time,
Or doing things you
and I'm not
hate.
having fun, like
Yeah.
that's in the past already.
Yeah.
I feel lighter. I feel more in control of my
Mm-hmm.
decisions. I get to say no when I want to
Mm-hmm.
say no or yes. So yeah, I think there are things of our personality that definitely are still there,
Yeah,
but
I
you're
think so
you're
too.
in constant grow if
Mm-hmm.
you enter into this self grow stuff.
Because honestly, I think um there will always be, I guess you can say, traces of it. Traces of people pleasing
The
in,
leftovers.
in different aspects with different people, different situations, right? Because it's like you can get very comfortable saying no to, like, let's say your friends, but when it comes to your sister, it's like you're
Right.
full on people pleasing 24/7, but you're so good at saying no to your friends.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. All
it's
that diversity
yeah.
is present in many different forms.
Yeah, and then some are higher dosages than the others, and I
Yeah.
think that's where it's like constant work of like, "Oh,
Now I have to work here.
here." Exactly, and then it moves kinda your focus on like, "Okay, I've kind of managed to learn this, and then now I'm moving to this." So, yeah, I think that's great,
Yeah. Yeah.
but Yeah, Bendy, this is a great topic.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
I
good.
love it.
I think there should be more parts of this.
Yeah, I think so too. Or we can also talk about codependency. I
Codependency.
think codependency is a big one.
Yeah.
So I think everybody has it. And abandonment.
Abandonment.
Yeah, that's a huge one too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess fear is part of our nature.
Yeah.
But also sometimes we fear things. Okay, it's kind of a fantasy, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fear is real, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes we create our own fear.
Yeah.
Right? And I think people pleasing is one of these major fears that are there in society, in culture, at home.
Yeah.
With a significant other.
Yes.
You know, a lot of fear is there.
Mm-hmm.
But once you experience this fear and look at his eyes and you're like, you don't give a shit.
Guess what? I don't give a shit either anymore.
that fear tells you, I'm gonna leave you alone.
Yeah.
You know what? Bye.
Bye. Yeah, exactly. That makes it so easy to be like, you know what? That's a great idea for you to leave me alone. But yeah, Penny, I think we should get deeper into it at other topics. And I think this is great. And I'm so glad for everybody tuning in to listen to our little podcast.
Yeah, our little podcast. Yeah, boring.
But thanks everybody for listening and for the awesome support. Share, like, and comment.
Subscribe.
Subscribe, please.
Here, the little square.